In the early 20th century, German scientists cracked open the atom and discovered that splitting atoms can release massive energy through a chain reaction they called nuclear fission.
The result? A chain reaction.
This news traveled quickly over the Atlantic, where the US started researching the possibilities out of fear of the Nazi Germany gaining access to such weapons. This is how the first nuclear research facility came to be in the United States. During World War II, nearly 500,000 Americans were working on a project so secret, most didn't even know what they were building. It was called the Manhattan Project, and it would forever change the course of world history. Scientists from the US, UK, and Canada collaborated on a weapon of unimaginable power, their mission to beat Nazi Germany to the atomic bomb. On July 16, 1945, the world's first nuclear test, the Trinity test, was conducted in New Mexico desert. The project cost nearly 1% of the country's GDP. The explosion yielded nearly 15 to 20 kilotons of TNT. The atomic age had officially begun. Just weeks later, President Harry Truman informed Soviet leader Joseph Stalin of the bomb. Stalin's attention was immediately piqued. On August 6, 1945, the US dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 3 days later, another bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. Over 100,000 civilians died instantly, and many more in the months and years that followed. To this day, it remains the only time nuclear weapons have ever been used in a war. While the US had gained access to one of the most powerful bombs ever created, other countries weren't very far behind. After the bombing in Japan, the world changed overnight. But one man saw past the destruction. He saw opportunity. The Soviet leader Joseph Stalin immediately accelerated the USSR's nuclear weapons program. He was determined not to be left behind in a world where power now meant atomic fire. There was no mystery about the idea of the bomb, splitting atoms to unleash deadly energy. But the real secret? It was in the details, the design specifications, the material composition, and the inner workings of America's bomb. So how did the Soviets learn about these complicated concepts? Soviet spies were sprinkled inside the Manhattan Project who were feeding information back to Moscow. But Stalin wasn't convinced. He feared the information might be distorted because of double agents. So instead of copying blindly, the Soviets triangulated data from the German nuclear research, intel from the Manhattan Project, and their own homegrown science. On August 29, 1949, the USSR conducted its first successful nuclear test.
That's right.
RDS-1, codenamed First Lightning, in Kazakhstan. In just 4 years, the Soviet Union had cut the nuclear gap.
President Truman's dramatic announcement that Russia has created an atomic explosion.
And so began the Cold War arms race, an era marked by paranoia, brinkmanship, and the relentless stockpiling of nuclear weapons. For decades, both superpowers teetered on the edge of mutually assured destruction, building bombs bigger, faster, and more terrifying than before, all because of one secret that was never really a secret at all. During World War II, the United States wasn't building the atomic bomb alone. In 1943, the UK signed a secret agreement with the US, the Quebec Agreement, to merge its nuclear program, known as tube alloys, with America's Manhattan Project. The deal was simple: share everything, build together, win the war. British scientists worked side by side with Americans in Los Alamos, bringing critical early research with them, much of which laid the groundwork for the bomb. But the alliance didn't last. In 1946, after the US had successfully developed and dropped the atomic bomb, President Harry Truman terminated the agreement and kept the secret to himself. The newly passed McMahon Act cut off all nuclear collaboration with foreign powers, including Britain. To America, the atomic bomb was now a national secret. But Britain wasn't starting from scratch. In 1952, on the remote Montebello Islands off the coast of Australia, Britain conducted its first nuclear atomic bomb test, Operation Hurricane.
Slowly, the seconds tick away.
The UK had officially become the third nuclear power in the world. While the US had tried to keep the nuclear club exclusive, Britain forced its way in, with its own bomb, its own scientists, and its own seat at the Cold War table. In the early 1940s, France had been quietly working towards atoms research, laying the groundwork for a nuclear weapon. But the research came to a halt when Nazi Germany invaded France. After World War II, France began to rebuild, not just its cities, but its scientific ambitions. In 1945, the government created the CEA to develop nuclear energy for both civilian and military purposes. France went all in. They built uranium enrichment, plutonium production, and even reprocessing facilities. All the tools needed for one goal, an independent atomic bomb. On February 13, 1960, Deep in the Sahara Desert, France entered the nuclear age. The bomb, codenamed Jerbois Bleu, exploded with a force of 70 kilotons, more powerful than the bomb dropped in Hiroshima. France was now the fourth nuclear power in the world. But France didn't just want the bomb, it wanted control. Leaders like Charles de Gaulle feared that America's nuclear protection under NATO might not hold in a real war with the Soviet Union. So France made a bold decision. It refused to integrate its nuclear arsenal into NATO's command. France would maintain its own independent nuclear force known as Force de Frappe, because to Paris, sovereignty meant security and nothing was more sovereign than the bomb. In the early years of the Cold War, two giants of communism stood side by side, Mao Zedong and Joseph Stalin. To the Soviet Union, China was a vital ally in the struggle against the capitalist West. To China, the USSR was a gateway to the atomic age. In exchange for uranium ore, the Soviet Union helped China launch its nuclear program, sending advisors, blueprints, and scientific support. A bomb they believed would unite the communist world under one nuclear shield. But in 1953, Stalin passed away, and with him, the Sino-Soviet alliance began to unravel. Stalin's successor Nikita Khrushchev launched a campaign to de-Stalinize the USSR. He rethought Moscow's relationship with Beijing. Khrushchev began withdrawing Soviet scientists from China and cut off access to crucial atomic data. Suddenly, China's nuclear dream was on life support. But Mao would not back down. Even as China plunged into the chaos of Cultural Revolution, where intellectuals were purged and universities shut down, the nuclear program survived, driven underground, kept alive by determined scientists working in secrecy. Then on October 16, 1964, deep in the Gobi Desert, China shocked the world. They detonated their first atomic bomb. With that single explosion, China became the fifth nuclear power, joining a club they were never invited to. In the world of nuclear weapons, some countries parade their power, others hide it. And then there's Israel, the only country that has never confirmed nor denied having the bomb, but almost everyone agrees they have it. Back in the 1950s, Israel quietly began building the foundations of a nuclear program with the help of an unlikely partner, France. Together they constructed the Dimona nuclear facility under the cover of research. But behind the fences, something much more powerful was taking shape. By the early 1960s, US intelligence picked up the trail. President John F. Kennedy was deeply alarmed. He pushed Israel for inspection, answers, and transparency.
Every man, woman, and child lives under a nuclear sword of Damocles. The weapons of war must be abolished before they abolish us.
But in 1963, JFK was assassinated and the pressure was stopped. His successor, Lyndon B. Johnson, took a much softer approach with Israel. Meanwhile, the country kept on building. By 1967, around the time of the Six-Day War, experts believe Israel had produced its first nuclear weapon, just in time to alter the balance of power in the Middle East. But the secret stayed hidden until 1986. That's when Mordecai Vanunu, a former technician in Dimona, leaked photos and documents to the British press. The world finally saw what Israel had been building for decades, a sophisticated nuclear arsenal. To this day, Israel maintains its policy of nuclear opacity. It won't confirm, it won't deny, and it won't sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It's a silent threat, and that's the point. Israel's bomb may be the worst kept secret in global politics, but in a volatile region where perception is power, sometimes silence speaks the loudest.
At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
Even as India gained its independence in 1947, its leaders had already begun thinking about the ultimate weapon, a nuclear bomb. But back then, the dream was distant, overshadowed by nation building. Then came 1962. India and China went to war over a disputed Himalayan border. India lost badly, and with that loss came a wake-up call. Regional power would require more than diplomacy. With tensions rising not just with China, but also with its younger neighbor, Pakistan, India knew it had to act, and so it quietly began turning its civilian nuclear energy program into something else. Through the Atoms for Peace initiative, India received nuclear technology and supplies from the US and Canada. But behind the scenes, Indian scientists were working on something far more explosive. In 1974, India detonated their first nuclear device. codenamed Smiling Buddha. The test marked India's entry into the nuclear weapons club. It was a peaceful nuclear explosion, but the message to its neighbors was crystal clear. India would never be caught unprepared again. India's bomb was the product of geopolitical anxiety, scientific ambition, and strategic secrecy, a reminder that in a dangerous neighborhood, power often relies in what you can build and what you choose to reveal. In 1971, Pakistan was split in two. East Pakistan, separated by language, culture, and 1,000 miles of Indian territory, became Bangladesh after a brutal civil war. And for the Pakistani military, it was a humiliation they vowed would never happen again. Still reeling from defeat in the 1965 war with India, Pakistan's leaders now faced another loss, a chunk of their country gone. So they made the decision: if India had the bomb, Pakistan would get one too.
I give a solemn pledge to all my countrymen that we will never let Pakistan be a victim of nuclear blackmail. We will never surrender our rights or claims because of India's nuclear status.
After India tested its first nuclear device, Pakistan took that as a direct threat. And from that moment on, the clock started ticking. Enter Abdul Qadir Khan, a Pakistani scientist working at a Dutch lab, one of Europe's top nuclear enrichment facilities. Khan stole classified blueprints, flew back to Pakistan, and began building the country's nuclear capability from the shadows. And he wasn't alone. China, India's longtime rival, saw Pakistan as a useful ally. They provided technical guidance, equipment, and materials to accelerate the program. Meanwhile, the United States, eager to fund anti-Soviet operations in Afghanistan, kept one eye closed. In 1998, India tested nuclear weapons again, this time openly. Just 1 week later, on May 28th, Pakistan responded. 5 underground tests shook the Chagai Hills in Balochistan. Pakistan had officially joined the nuclear club. The arms race between the two South Asian rivals was now out in the open, but behind Pakistan's nuclear pride lay a much darker secret. In 2004, Abdul Qadir Khan, the father of Pakistan's bomb, appeared on national television.
The investigation has established that many of the reported activities did occur, and that these were inevitably initiated at my behest. In my interviews with the concerned government officials, I was confronted with the evidence and the findings, and I have voluntarily admitted that much of it is true and accurate.
He confessed to illegally selling nuclear secrets to Libya, Iran, and North Korea. The black market network he created may have helped spark the last nuclear weapons program on Earth. His network reshaped the global nuclear landscape, arming rogue regimes and destabilizing decades of non-proliferation efforts. From national trauma to nuclear triumph, Pakistan's path to the bomb was forged through espionage, alliance, and secrecy. But its legacy is still unfolding. North Korea aligned itself with the Soviet Union and China after the Korean War. By the 1960s, with the help from the USSR, they built their first nuclear research facility, officially for civilian use under the Atoms for Peace program. Fast forward to 1990s, while the world focused on North Korea's plutonium reactor, they quietly began enriching uranium with the help from Pakistan's A.Q. Khan, who smuggled in nuclear tech and designs. In 2002, the US exposed the secret uranium program. The next year, North Korea withdrew from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, becoming the first nation to ever do so.
The main point is that North Korea should understand how strongly the United States and many other council members feel that they should not test this nuclear device, and that if they do test it, it will be a very different world the day after the test.
And then on October 9, 2006, the world watched in shock. North Korea had detonated its first nuclear bomb underground. The explosion was rather small, but the message was massive and heard around the world. The bomb which the world rushed to keep out of the hands of a dictator like Hitler, that bomb was now in the hands of another dictatorship. Today, 9 countries hold over 12,000 nuclear weapons, and the world is still trying to manage the power it unleashed 80 years ago. There were many countries that tried to develop the bomb over time. Some failed due to the lack of resources, and others were talked out of it through diplomacy.
Let's talk about Iran. Israel and Iran continue to exchange strikes for the 6th day in a row.
Iran has escalated its uranium enrichment to 60%, approaching weapons-grade levels, and insists on continuing its nuclear activities, despite the United States' efforts to keep the country from any further developments. At this time, Israel is the only country in the Middle East that has nuclear weapons. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has stated that if Iran acquires nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia would seek to do the same, highlighting the kingdom's security concerns in the region. As long as world leaders with nuclear weapons intimidate their neighbors, countries will continue to seek the big bomb to balance out regional power. The Cold War may be over, but the legacy of 1949 still lingers in bunkers, arsenals, and in the delicate balance of today's global diplomacy.